I fell in love with you before the second show. Your guitar, it sounds so sweet and clear, but you're not really here. It's just the radio. Don't you remember you told me you love me, baby? You said you'd be coming back this way again. Baby, 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 oh baby, I love you, I really do. Loneliness is such a sad affair, and I can hardly wait to be with you again. What to say to make you come again? Come back to me again and play your sad guitar. Don't you remember you told me you love me, baby? You said you'd be coming back to me, baby. Baby, 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 oh baby, I love you, I really do. Don't you remember you told me you love me, baby? You said you'd be coming back this way again. Baby, 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 oh baby, love, I really do.
Good morning. Our opening words this morning are by Jason Cook. We seekers are on a quest to discover truth and meaning. Sometimes we think that we found it, wrapped up, glimmering with newness, straight off the intellectual assembly line. All the answers right here for us and for others if they'd only listen. But truth has a way of coming up in disguise. Sometimes wearing rags, sometimes finery, but so often cloaked from our immediate sight. And sometimes that which we have rejected, that which we have let go of or decided was only for others but not us, that can be our teacher. Let our time of worship be an acknowledgement of the never-ending journey towards truth and meaning. And let our appreciation of those we learn from along the way. Come, let us worship together. And so I just want to welcome you with, as we do every, live from Fellowship Hall, it's our LCUUF Sunday service. And of course, we had announcements on the slideshow before the service. If you missed those, we'll be posting those in the sharing tomorrow.
Our chalice lighting words today are by Reverend Steve Dick, former Executive Director of the International Council of Unitarians and Universalists. The light of the sun does not lift the shadows that have fallen on humanity the world over. we relight our chalice flame to reignite a spirit of radical optimism, knowing that it takes us all living what matters to dispel those who would divide us. All manner of things will be well if we ourselves make them well. May our free religious communities embody the right relationships our world so desperately needs. And now in Spanish. La luz del sol no levanta las sombras que han caído sobre la humanidad. Encendemos de una vez nuestro cáliz para fortalecer el espíritu de optimismo radical, sabiendo que nos corresponde vivir lo que es importante para eliminar y quitar los que quieren dividirnos. Todas las cosas van a estar bien, pero solo si nosotros mismos las hacemos bien. Que nuestras comunidades religiosas y libres incorporan las correctas relaciones que desesperadamente nuestro mundo tanto necesita. Ahora, please light your chalice. Prende su cáliz.
Let's light in celebration for the life that we share. Wake now my senses and hear the earth call. Feel the deep power of being in all. Keep the web of creation you vow. Giving, receiving, as love shows us how. Wake now my reason, reach out to the new. Join with each pilgrim who quests for the truth. Honor the beauty and wisdom of time. Suffer thy limit and praise the sublime. Wake now my conscience with justice thy guide. Join with all people whose rights are denied. Take not for granted a privileged place. God loves, embraces the whole human race.
Each week, we take time to remind ourselves that we belong to a community which cares for each other. We do this by sharing any significant joys or sorrows in our lives. If you have a joy or sorrow to share today, you can type it into the chat now. We'll read those aloud. First, let us voice our sorrows or concerns, whatever you or the world may be holding that is in need of our healing and caring thoughts. You are welcome to type sorrows into the chat now.
We have a sorrow from Bob Coaches, who said, please light a candle for my friend Sherry Unger. She was like a sister to me. She passed last Wednesday. Many of the UUs will remember her from her visit here and from our group trips to PV and Mexico City. We have
Oh,
a concern from Liz Mulder, who says she has a concern for the ongoing situation at the U.S. southern border, especially for the welfare of the unaccompanied children. Please light a candle for Paula Odom, who has an unspoken concern.
What?
That's all.
Now let us recall the joys, whatever you may be celebrating, whatever evokes a feeling of joy or peace for yourself or others. You are welcome to type joys into the chat box now.
We have a joy from Liz Mulder, who says, Linda, Jessen, and Michael Reason, I love the introduction piece you did in today's service. I was swaying to the music.
Yeah, I can't hear.
I also have a joy, this is Colleen Beery, that I'm fully vaccinated, and so is my daughter and her boyfriend, and most of the family. Things are happening quickly in California. And my other joy is I have a flight reserved and a short-term rental reserved July 1st. I'll be back lakeside. We have a joy from Doug Mattoon, who is happy to be back in Mexico. He's in Mexico City. I believe that's all. Oh, sorry, there is one from Paula Odom, who says that Karen Carpenter's treatments have been successful. Okay, that's it.
And this candle from our care team represents those sorrows that are too raw, too difficult for us to share aloud. So many of us have had losses, partners, children, grandchildren, losses that remain present with us every day. So many of us have burdens, anger, fear, and frustration, all of those things that weigh heavy on our hearts. We will light this candle for all those unspoken sorrows.
Let me start our time of meditation with a few words from Reverend Rebecca Parker. Parker was the president and professor of theology at Stark King School for the Ministry when I attended. These are the words. There is a love holding me. There is a love holding you. There is a love holding all. I rest in this love. Let us take this time of relative quiet to rest, to feel ourselves held by this love. Blessed be.
The early character of Susie's God, per her Lutheran upbringing, 1952 to 1970. Until I was 17, I left home for college around 1970. When I left college, My Lutheran church and devoutly religious parents told me what to know and believe about God. That stopped away from them when I was allowed to think deeply and critically for myself and found I wasn't alone in my doubts and disbelief. But what was the character of my God when I was in elementary school? Well, at that time, I knew that God was right up there with the other wish-granting, gift-giving entities such as the Tooth Fairy, the Easter Bunny, and Santa Claus. In fact, God, in our youthful minds, was like the father of Santa Claus. At least the Santas of downtown Cleveland department stores where we'd go every year for Christmas photos, sitting on his lap, telling him what we wanted. Sort of like praying to God. Aha, another commonality. Granted, one wore red and one wore white. One was up in the North Pole and the other one was up in the heavens above, but both were usually pictured with blue eyes, white skin, and long white beards. However, God kind of got one out because he was year-round, and we didn't have to write to him like we had to do with Santa. We could just fold our hands and close our eyes and tell him any day of the year and any time. We learned in Sunday school that God didn't sleep. He was always there to listen to our prayers, and as good little Christians, we should pray often. Not asking for favors all the time, but thanking him for all that he had done for us, especially at mealtime. As a kid, I sometimes shopped at Pick and Pay with my mom, and later on I'd see her and Nana prepare all our meals. Nevertheless, we always gave thanks and praised God for providing the food and doing all the work. That didn't seem fair. However, then I learned that we are nothing without God and his blessings, and we need to show him a lot of gratitude. Beyond God being someone who allowed us to enjoy delicious meals every day, God also not only just heard our prayers 24/7, but he could also grant us our wishes or deny them. His prerogative. What's more, we were taught, God could do this for every single Christian anywhere on our whole planet. Wow. God was everywhere at the same time, doing all the meal preparing and wish granting for everybody. Remember, I'm a kid here. We were told that God's like really smart too, and that he knows absolutely everything. Past, present, and how could this be? And future. And that he even knows exactly what is best for you. And at all times in your life. Even beyond that. In addition, he knows what is best for the whole planet and everyone on it. Another amazing thing my church taught me about God was that he has supreme, unlimited, infinite power. And he can make happen whatever he wants. Wow. Okay, now Susie goes to junior high and high school. Time for 3 years of catechism classes, studying the Bible and learning about the Lutheran faith, dogma, creeds, history, the confession and absolution of sins, sacraments, and more, so we could finally become confirmed in our church and take communion at the altar, which meant eating a small chunk of God's Son's body and drinking a bit of his blood, of course, in the form and taste of the bottom of a white styrofoam cup and some cheap red wine. I only have time for one lesson learned from catechism class here, so let's quickly focus on sin. In the eyes of the Lutheran God, we are all horrible sinners who need to confess those sins frequently to get forgiven. Clean slate. Doing that and faithfully proclaiming that Jesus died on the cross to save us from our sins, we're going to heaven, no matter what horrendous things we may have chosen to do in our lifetime. Woohoo! Let me end with something that we had to recite together before taking communion in the Lutheran Church. Even in high school, I knew it was wrong, and I couldn't say it without hiding a hand with fingers crossed. Oh, most merciful God, ooh, I hate saying this. We admit unto thee that we are by nature sinful and unclean, and we have sinned against thee by thought, word, and deed. I mean, we're by nature sinful and unclean. Nothing to do with nature and nurture, nothing to do with choosing. We're just, humans are bad people, and we have to go to church to get forgiven. Ugh. We are by nature sinful and unclean, and we have sinned against thee by thought, word, by the words. I lost my place, but I know it. I'm down here. We admit unto thee that we are by nature sinful and unclean, and I have sinned against thee by thought, word, and deed. Wherefore I plead for refuge to thine infinite mercy, seeking and imploring thy grace. We justly deserve your present and eternal punishment. In the name of our Lord Jesus Christ, who died on the cross for our sins, forgive us. Father, forgive us. Have mercy upon our souls. Well, that was my unreal rendezvous with God as a schoolgirl being brought up in Cleveland. It's now water over the dam. The water moves on and up and becomes something else, changing along the way. In time, so do we, unless we're stuck in a religion we don't believe in.
The story of my religious journey is somewhat similar to Susie's, and I'm sure those of many of you here today. I was raised in the United Methodist faith, but in my early teens, I found the doctrine increasingly unbelievable. I stayed with the church for the community, for the youth group, but left in college. My experience in college, it was in Texas, was that many friends tried to convert me. This led me further away from Christianity altogether and toward atheism. I still wanted community, though, and was very happy to totally by chance find Unitarian Universalism in my late 20s. I fell in love with the faith immediately, a faith that has accepted my atheism, in fact, where my minister was atheist. I became active, and lo, these many years later, well, here I am. So let's get a sense of everybody's spiritual journeys. Now, this is going to be pretty basic. We're going to use the poll feature in Zoom. And so it's obviously going to be pretty rough. But it'll give us kind of an idea of who we are here and where we've been in our faith journeys. So let's explore our backgrounds and where we currently are. Here are the questions, and we're going to pop up a little poll here momentarily. The questions are, I was raised in another faith tradition, and I later found Unitarian Universalism, or I was raised with no faith tradition and later found Unitarian Universalism, or I am a born and raised Unitarian Universalist from birth, Or finally, I'm currently with another faith tradition or no faith tradition at all, but not UU. So there are 4 possibilities. And we've set it so here so there are 2 of you. You can both choose different items. Just click your mouse or touch your screen to select your choice. As I said, it's fairly rough. Many of you may say, well, I'm not included in this, but you're kind of forced to make one choice or another or no choice at all. Anyways, like I said, not perfect. We'll give you a few moments to put some things up, and then Colleen will shift to showing us the results.
Okay. Here we go.
And here we go. Let's see. It looks like the vast majority of you, 24 of you, were raised in another faith, like Linda and me. Not Linda, sorry, Susie and me, but that might be true for you too. And Kat last week, a number of us were raised in other faiths and found our ways to Unitarian Universalism. And then a good number of others of you, about almost 20%, were raised with no faith tradition and then found Unitarian Universalism. Interestingly, there are absolutely 0, at least in our current. There's one who wasn't able to vote because he's manning the console here, who was born and raised as a Unitarian Universalism. I thought we had a small number of folks like that, but that's very typical, actually, that there are very few of us in Unitarian Universalism currently who are born and raised in our tradition. And then a few folks are coming from other traditions altogether and just joining this service or participating with us, and that's perfectly fine. That's in fact great. So, a common thread. So there seems to be a common thread that runs through many of our stories, not all the stories, but many, that we just couldn't countenance what we were being taught. We couldn't countenance many of the things. You know, Susie talked about the doctrine of sin, that we are all sinners, and last week Kat mentioned not being able to believe in an all-powerful God, as did Susie. And others couldn't take ideas of heaven and hell. And my issue also was with God. To use a line from John Dominic Crossan, who's a biblical scholar who I find very appealing, he asked this question: what is the character of your God? I mean, that's the question. What is the character of your God? That is to say, when you think of God, what do you imagine? I just couldn't tolerate being told to respect, even worship, some old guy in the sky that came across as judgmental, capricious, and at times vengeful. I couldn't worship such a narcissist who demanded everyone bow down to him. And look, this all-powerful God seemed to have little to show for his efforts than this world full of suffering and trouble. To think of it today, even bad presidents measure up better than that kind of God. To think of it again, maybe that's why so many conservatively religious people were attracted to such a bad president, for he was a reflection of their God. But I'm getting a little snarky here. Sorry, let me come back to the main theme. Now, I think there's a deeper issue here. If God is in fact all-knowing and perfectly good, as well as all-powerful, supremely powerful, capable of anything, then why is it that bad things happen to good people? Why is the world such a mess? Why can't God fix it? In fact, there's a whole area of theological study called theodicy. That word actually means God's judgment. Now, theodicy focuses on perhaps explaining away the problem of suffering in a world ruled by such an all-powerful God. But for me, the logic of theodicy became quite contorted, and these odd arguments just fell flat. So I, like many of you, walked away from all of this. With a God of such low character, at least in my mind, well, atheism was the place for me. But one of the great things about Unitarian Universalism is that it creates a wide field for people to explore and modify their own theological ideas. We're not limited to some single sacred text, take it or leave it, or some single religious idea or theology. We try to be open to a variety of religious ideas and sources, even more than one at the same time. So over the course of my faith journey, I've explored Hinduism, various forms of Buddhism, sampled just a little bit of Islam, particularly the Sufi branch of Islam, a touch of neo-paganism, and some variations of New Thought religion, as well as variants of liberal Christianity, both Catholic and Protestant. Sometimes more than one at one time. Now, some folks would consider me a dilettante, a dabbler, unwilling to go deep or just stick with what I've got. I think that's their problem, not mine, for I've found much depth and wisdom in my wanderings. And regarding God, these wanderings expose me to a lot of possibilities. No God, one God, multitudes of God, goddesses, God here, God there, God in everything, God outside of everything. It's quite amazing. So how about another poll? Where are you on God? And by the way, God can be plural if you like. God, the gods, goddesses, whatever name fits for you. And so here's the poll. Again, we're kind of forcing you into categories. I'm sorry about that, but it is multiple choice. You can choose more than one thing, especially if there are more than one of you in the room. You might want to do that. So just to kind of break it down, are you a theist? You believe that God exists as a separate being. Pantheist, God exists everywhere in everything in the universe. Panentheist, God not only exists everywhere and everything in the universe, but is bigger than the universe. Or maybe you're a deist. God started the universe, but then stepped away and is no longer actively involved in it. Or an agnostic, perhaps you're uncertain or have no opinion about the existence of God. Or an atheist, God does not exist. So we'll give you a moment or two to select some one or more choices. And I'll wait as Colleen is kind of letting things settle in, and then she'll pop up the results here. And I know it's rough. There are some other choices that probably ought to be here. Okay. All right. So in our crowd, it looks like there's very few people, like approaching zero, that are more traditionally theist. But we have quite a few folks, about almost, 40%, more than 40%, who are pantheists, believing that God exists everywhere and everything in the universe. A smattering of panentheists and deists, I think a couple of each. And then the winner is agnostic, sort of at a little over half. And then about 30%, a little more than 30% are atheists. So a very interesting mix of beliefs here. And that's, I think, one of the delights about Unitarian Universalism is that we can all hang together with varying different beliefs about a subject that really pushes a lot of folks' buttons out there. So it wasn't until I was at a Unitarian Universalist seminary, actually the Star King School for the Ministry, that I encountered an idea of God that met the character test for me. Reverend Rebecca Parker, whom we heard a little reading before, was the president of the school as well as the professor of theology. And this was toward the end of our overview course in UU theologies, after we had covered Unitarian Christianity, the Romantics, Transcendentalism, humanism, all the rest, that we got to this idea called process theology, sometimes called process thought. It was clear that Parker was enamored with this idea. I learned later that she's considered one of the leaders in this field. After her exposition on this topic, I noted that many of my classmates found it highly attractive. So what is this process theology? It's a little hard to put into words. I think a brief and imperfect summary might be that everything is interconnected. Everything is changing and thus influencing everything else. Everything means everything, including God. Maybe a more tangible, perhaps metaphorical explanation might be these words by the UU minister Fran Dearman. She says, and I quote, "What is process theology? It's hard to explain. Imagine a small brown cat walking towards wisdom, taking with her all she has learned, growing into knowledge with each new experience, and leaving each individual she meets also changed by that meeting. At the end of each day, the cat is still herself, and yet also something new, reshaped by each event she has experienced into something unforeseen and unforeseeable. In the simplest terms possible, that's process theology. Only you are the cat, and so is God." So process thought, or process philosophy, was developed in the 1920s by the mathematician and philosopher Alfred North Whitehead. Now, Whitehead realized that just as physics had been revolutionized by the ideas of quantum mechanics and relativity, so philosophy needed updating as well. Whitehead proposed that reality is not so much made up of individual material objects, like atoms and that sort of stuff, but of processes in relationship with each other. Everything is connected. The universe not so much exists, but it is in a process of becoming. Other thinkers, notably the Unitarian theologian Charles Hartshorne, took this philosophy further into the realm of theology, asking where God fit into all this. He realized that God, too, was in process, changing, growing, connected with everything. In this view, God was not all-powerful, but could only influence, encouraging, inviting other processes, such as people, towards a larger virtues of complexity, beauty, goodness. Another Unitarian Universalist theologian later on, Bernard Loomer, called these good qualities by the word size, implying that the universe, as well as God and each of us, are growing in size and complexity. According to Loomer, and I quote, by size, and I mean size, because he always put it in capital letters with dashes in between. By size, I mean the capacity of a person's soul, the range and the depth of their love, their capacity for relationship. I mean the volume of life you can take into your being. Now, I don't want to imply that process theology is just a UU thing. It's been attractive to liberal thinkers in many religious traditions. It's been very popular in many mainline Christians, perhaps because it's an alternative to the harsh and rigid theologies of many of the evangelicals and fundamentalist Christians. I find it interesting, for example, that Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was attracted to process theology and in fact wrote his PhD dissertation on another great process theologian, Henry Nelson Wyman. Much of King's language, like his famous line, "We are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality," hints at his process thinking. Here are a few aspects of process theology that I find appealing. The first is interconnection. This first aspect is the sense that everything is interconnected to everything else. This deep interconnection appears to be foundational to quantum mechanics, what Einstein called spooky action at a distance. Further, our understanding of the natural world around us, the living world of animals and plants, is now best understood not by studying individual creatures or individual species, but by understanding the interrelationships, the ecology. We've learned that cooperation is just as important as competition in nature. We've learned the hard way how making a change in one part of our environment pulls at the strings of many other parts of the environment. And this has been a humbling lesson. Even in human relations, sociology, economics, politics are all best understood by considering the relationships among humans. Everyone, everything is interconnected. This is the essence of our seventh principle, respect for the interdependent of all web of all existence of which we are a part. A second aspect of process theology is the idea of change. The idea that we are all changing, just as the world is, the universe is, and even God is changing. This is a relatively new idea. Consider that when Whitehead was formulating his process theology, astronomers believed that the universe was static and eternal. The Big Bang origin of the universe had not yet been postulated. The Earth, too, was seen as relatively static, and even evolution was seen as a gradual, almost imperceptible process. We now know that the universe, as well as the Earth, are both far more dynamic. So the idea that everything is changing, including God, seems natural today. Change allows for possibility, for an open future where anything can happen. Change allows for freedom. And to include God in this changing mix means that God can change with us and be more of a partner and less of a parent in our mutual evolution. A third aspect of process theology is that God doesn't act directly in the world. God doesn't go around performing miracles. God acts simply by encouraging, urging, perhaps loving all of us, everything, the universe, towards good and creative ends. God draws us towards complexity, creativity, and beauty. Perhaps a metaphor might be evolution by natural selection. Evolution has created significant complexity, many beautiful life forms, even sentient beings like us evolved out of inanimate raw materials. But evolution is a pretty messy process. Creatures die. Whole species die off too. Evolution has no preordained outcome. There is no director. What arises, arises. But evolution, at least on this earth, has created beings that can think and wonder and relate to one another and to the universe. Perhaps God's role in the process of evolution is to simply to yearn, to love the universe towards evolving that degree of complexity, that creativity. And all the while, God is evolving too. God influences us, and we influence God. It's kind of a love relationship, isn't it? Shared, freely entered into, with all of us together, yearning for a better world, a grander, more lovely and beautiful universe. God is a source of this love, loving us into a better future. So you can see that this collection of ideas we call process theology is rich and complex. I hope for some of you it might lead you to further explore this particular field of theology and philosophy. Perhaps for some of you, it will be nice to have a name for some of the ideas and beliefs you have encountered or held for a long time. Maybe this little introduction will be enriching and illuminating. Blessed be.
This is the time in our service when we ask that you remember that we share our gifts here through pledging and donations. We're not meeting in person now, but our connections to each other and our contributions to the community continue. Instructions for payments to the fellowship are on a slide during the announcements before the service every week. And while you are considering your gifts to the fellowship, remember that each month LCUUF donates 5,000 pesos or more to an organization providing food aid in our lakeside community. For the month of April, we will be supporting Poco a Poco, which works with poor communities east of Chapala. When you pay your pledge, please add something for Share the Basket, as you used to place pesos in our physical basket. You can donate in the same way that you pay your pledge, but please donate Share the Basket separately, or indicate what part of your donation is for Share the Basket. Your offerings are gratefully received.
We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we keep in our hearts and share with all the world.
And there are closing words now. If we return to that very old idea renewed by process theology that God is synonymous with love, then let's listen to Rebecca Parker's poem anew. There is a love holding me. There is a love holding you. There is a love holding all. I rest in this love. Blessed be.
As you know, Linda is about to leave us this coming week, going back to our homeland, Canada, and she has been such a tremendous part of our services here over the past 6 months, and we're going to be sorry to see you go, Linda, but we look forward to your return in the fall, and on behalf of all of us here, I'd like you to accept this little token of our appreciation for everything that you have done and the joy that you bring to people's lives.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you. Speaking of joy, we're going to sing a joyful song. Get up and dance. If you wake up and don't want to smile, years to come.